Hey guys, today we're going to be putting in the headers in our 350Z. Today's video we are specifically focusing on the installation of the header. So if you want to see how I take out all the different components, I've actually broken it down into different videos. So we show you how to take out the sensors, we show you how to take out the high flow cats or test pipes if you have them. We break it down in detail, that way you guys can take in the information in a better, more thorough manner, as opposed to making like one really big long 2-hour video and then you start to maybe skip over some information. So as far as orientation goes, I was looking at the service manual, and the service manual shows how the gasket is. So it shows it on this thin area is on the back, on the passenger side of the header. Now on the driver's side, it's showing the thin area is on the front. So we have to have dots up. So dots up on this one, and then it's the opposite on the other side. So dots up. So we can see on both orientations that this raised area is going to go up against the cylinder head. So looking at our gasket, we can see the dots are there. Based on the diagram, it's showing the thin portion of the gasket towards the back of the engine. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on. And for the driver's side, we can see that it is the opposite. So the thinner portion of the gasket is towards the front of the engine. Now, we're just going to maneuver the headers in. It's going to come out a little bit differently and go back in differently when you go from factory to aftermarket, because the aftermarket one is so much larger. So we're going to come in this way. Flanges, slip it on. Now you took out your old exhaust studs and you're going to put in the new ones, and also put in new nuts. Fresh hardware is going to make everything easier and give you peace of mind. So I'm just going to put this on as far as I can to hold it in place. So the driver's side is definitely more of a challenge. So make sure that you have your steering column out of the way. So I found if I have it at a 90, sorry, a little beyond 90, you slip it over, and then you rotate it back this way. Bring your arm up in here to help guide it. Oh, sorry, Cerakote. At this point, I'm just maneuvering it until I line up with the studs. You can get them in. Just definitely the challenge is all these primaries are so much bigger and in the way compared to those cast manifolds. You start to appreciate the factory manifolds for installation design, because as nicely as these Tomeis are designed, they're designed for performance. So we'll show you guys how we get around everything. All right, so you got your headers loosely fitted. So no matter what the brand is, I would highly recommend you test fit them on first. Make sure you get over all your studs and it can easily slip on and get onto that cylinder head, because you see in our other video where we were comparing premium to entry-level headers, and the entry-level headers had a hard time fitting on, which required a lot more modification. So this shows if you have a good design, if it goes on just as well as the factory one. And you also want, at this stage, you're checking for clearance issues. So like, can I get the steering back on? Am I hitting anything? Is anything in the way? Like, do I have to mark this off with a marker and dent some of the primaries? You might on some brands. This one, I don't have to do that. So we can go ahead and we're gonna go over all the studs and put all the nuts on by hand. For hardware, I went to Z1 Motorsports and I picked up OEM hardware. I think this is gonna be the best for any kind of brand of header that you're gonna put on. You can also get these obviously from your local dealership. So we got the back nut on, all the top ones, and now the video became a how-to to advertisement to why you should pay someone. Let's go over here so you guys can see. See if we can get a good vantage point. So this stud is the one by the compressor, driver's side, towards the front of the engine on the bottom. That's where you have to get creative. So there's a little butyl in my socket. I have an all wobble head, and I'm working on there by hand. It's a pain in the butt. This is not easy. So we're gonna slowly thread this on by hand as far as we can go. You see I have the compressor on the car still. It is easier if you have it off, but you can do it with it still in the car if you want. And this is, to me, this is the second hardest one. It was originally the hardest one until we bought a design that has all these primaries in the way. So exhaust shops, I think you're gonna thank me right now, because I think a lot of people might be saying they want to pay you guys to do it. I know I do right now. But if you're willing to have patience and you can take the car off the road for a little bit, and do not time crunch yourself on this job. Unless you're doing this every day, I don't. I am taking my time, coming back to the car after work fresh, and putting this thing together in stages. Now I'm going to show you guys how I got the nuts on hand by hand first. So for the first few, you can reach over, like putting your hand back here. So my hand was coming up over here, and I get the back nut and the top nut. And then what I found for the passenger side, to get that bottom middle primary, I came up around here and got my hand on the stud and worked on the nut. And then to get the one at the front of the bottom, put my hand over here. Let's see if we get a vantage point. You guys see my finger? Okay, so you see my arms here by the rack, and then right above the motor mount, the heat shield. So you can, I have smaller hands. You can get your hand in here, pay your friend with smaller hands. Quick little side note, because I was thinking when I'm putting this on why I don't like doing jobs like this on modern Japanese cars. My name, Anthony J350, is actually not after the 350Z. I bought this car years after. I actually named my channel 350 because it was the only number that I liked, because I like 350 small blocks because they're easy to work on. So on the driver's side, you have to reach all the way over, and you're reaching for the back, the tops, and then you can kind of get your hand over here. So I'm in front of the K-member here. So you see here's the tie brace, here's the front suspension components by the compressor for the AC. I'm reaching my hand up in here to get at it. Everyone's gonna be a bit different, but you can see I can get my hand up in here, if you have bigger forearms, again, you're going to have to change your technique, but I was able to approach it that way. And then for the bottom front stud or the nut, I'll show you how I did it with the socket extension. When you saw us remove the factory fasteners off the factory manifolds, you saw me do everything from underneath. However, when I'm doing the reinstall for the parts up top, I'm taking a flex head ratcheting wrench, and I can come up here and I can tighten it slowly from the top. The reason why I'm going this way is I can get a good angle, I can see everything, and everything's fresh, so it threads on relatively easily. Now you want to put on new nuts because these have a different shape at the end, helping them grab. So it's technically a locking nut, that's why you want to use fresh hardware, and it will take you a little bit of time to thread them on. So another challenge with trying to get at the middle primary with the bottom fastener, you can see here I have removed the support for the dipstick, for the oil dipstick. It's just one 10 millimeter bolt, comes right out. You can leave the dipstick in there, highly recommend you do, that way no debris goes in the engine. And you see I have my really long flex head. So I have this really long flex head, combination box end wrench, and I can get it on there. And you have to thread on the nuts as far as you can so it gets tension. And I was able to get just enough swing by removing that support, and I can go ahead and tighten this. So I'm going to have to estimate how tight this is going to go on, because even if I were to remove all this stuff, I don't see myself getting a torque wrench on that particular fastener. Okay, for this one fastener, we did have to remove the alternator to get at that guy, and this was the hardest one. Just had to use an assortment of tools, of box end wrenches and short ones, just to turn it and get it snug. Now, if you're using other brands of headers, you might not have to deal with this. Now, you could say we could have taken the stud out and moved it to the top position. This was the stud that got stuck in the car, and we didn't want to force it out, so we had to deal with that in that position. Now, when it comes to tightening it, you're going to have to be creative as far as figuring out the torque spec. So what I did was I took this crowfoot adapter and I put it onto the back nut, and then I used the torque wrench afterwards, torqued it down to the manufacturer specification, and then I went back with my wrench to feel how it felt, because for me it's really super tight to get in there with a torque wrench, especially a 1/2 inch one, and torque everything down evenly. So I will admit I am guessing a little bit on this one. I think the only way to really torque these manifolds down, or these headers down properly, is to do it with the engine out of the vehicle. So we're going to put in our air fuel ratio sensors, or wideband, or front O2s, whatever you want to call it. I have a little bit of high temp anti-seize on here. So we're going to put it into the collector. And what I'm doing here is I'm helping twist the wire. So I'm holding it back here and I'm twisting the wire with it so it doesn't bind. Because if you haven't had a check engine light, your sensors might still be okay. If you have like over 150,000 or like 100,000 miles on these sensors, you might want to change them out, but they are pricey. So we'll go ahead and take our O2 sensor socket. So it has a slit here. So I'm going to use mine because this one on the passenger side is fairly new. The one on my driver's side is, as far as I know, original. So it probably does need to be changed out eventually. And then we can go ahead and route it back the way it was and start putting it back together. Up top, now we're going to plug or click. Up top, we're going to take our plugs and then we just put them into their clips. Going ahead and grease my connectors. Optional, I like to do it. So we make sure that we go all the way in seats and then you put in your clip. Now on the passenger side, I had to re-zap strap the connector so that way it's nice and snug with the factory harness. Okay, so before we finish putting the exhaust together, I guess you guys want to hear how this sounds open header. I will admit these engines don't really sound good naturally, but we'll play it for you anyways. So again, the reason why I picked the Tomei product is they are the only ones that I've seen that provide this heat shield for the fuel lines. We're taking the extra measure, so we're adding sound deadening to it. So one, it's not going to resonate, and it's going to act as an extra barrier for heat. So we're now mating up the test pipes to our Motordyne XYZ pipe with our high flow cat. And I've gone ahead and purchased new gaskets from Nissan. So you can see here that the OEM gasket meets up nicely. So this diameter is smaller than this diameter, but that's okay. So if you had a gasket that was too small for some reason, you have to double check and make sure your diameters match, or else you're not going to get the benefits of having the bigger exhaust. And here is the shield installed, and you can see why it's crucial is because the passenger side header gets quite close to these fuel lines over here. So I love that they were thinking ahead and just making sure that there's added protection, because this is the only header brand that I've seen that supplies a part like this. So we didn't have to remove the coolant hard lines. I will admit we did have to, for assembly, we had to take this off and we had to take out the fan shroud. So I think I'm gonna do another video for you guys. I didn't think of it when I did the install for this. If I put nut certs on these fans, I could have unbolted just the fan itself and I could have got that bolt out really easily. But the bolts are so long for the accessory drive on these things, you'd have to pull out the whole fan shroud in general to get that bolt out. That's kind of where it was just a big pain in the butt. So I'm going to change that later on to make this car more serviceable. But taking this out in the fan shroud and the air box, not a big deal. It is a pain in the butt to remove the cooling lines just to tighten or remove things. And if it's an older car, you might have a hard time taking all that stuff out. But my argument for why it's better not to take out those hard lines is, like, let's say you have to go back and retighten some fasteners. They're headers. It's probably gonna happen. They might back off a bit. Could you imagine trying to remove all those hard lines again just to get at the fasteners, just to do a retorquing after you've broken in your headers? I know a lot of you do not want to do that. That's probably why you don't even want to take on this job. So by doing it this way, in some ways it's more work, but when it comes to servicing it and retightening it as you're breaking the vehicle in, this might be the way to go. Let's quickly review the challenges with installing aftermarket headers. So again, quickly going back to the stock piece, we can see that the way it's designed is we have really good straight shots. So again, on the factory HR, it'd probably be very similar when you look at the design, is they leave a lot of room so you can go straight at it. Those are going to be the easiest style of headers to install and give you really good gains. The only downside is you're going to also have to purchase HR style high flow catalytic converters or test pipes in order to make everything work. So even though these aren't the Tanabe ones, these are entry-level ones that we did in the other video, the concept still applies. So we can see right off the bat, we do not have a straight shot in the middle over here. This is going to be one of the more challenging ones for you guys. Also, depending on the header design itself, usually the primaries are larger, it might be harder to get a gear wrench on. The gear wrench has a bigger head compared to a traditional box end because it has gears inside. So this is the passenger side. You should be able to get it from the back here and on top over here. Now for the ones on top, it's gonna be much easier for you to grab your really long flex head, and you can come on to these ones and then you can tighten them. When it comes to this guy over here, on the front of the engine, grab your 1/4 inch flex head ratchet and you'll be able to get onto it. So what it looks like from the side is you'll have to experiment with your extensions that you have available. It's gonna have to go like this. That's why you want something with a really long handle to give you a lot of torque, and that way you can get on snug. It will be difficult to put on a torque wrench. So what you're gonna have to do is you have to use a crowfoot. And honestly, even for the back, you might have to use a crowfoot. I just did it like that, and I had an extension with my torque wrench, and then I set it to the factory specification, and I click it once. And I'm only doing that to get a feel, so then I go back to these tools, and I go back to one that I torqued, and I kind of get a feel for how tight it is, because I don't know about you, unless you have this engine out of the vehicle, I don't think you guys are going to be able to get a torque wrench in every single one. You're going to have to go by feel on this one. I'm just being honest on how I did it. So, like I said, the front one, use your ratchet. Now, the middle bottom one now becomes the hardest one. What we ended up doing was on the passenger side, like I showed you, remove the alternator. And on the Tomei, we couldn't even get the ratchet head onto it. We couldn't get the box end onto it. We had to go open and just slowly tighten it. That was the only one that was the hardest one on the whole car. So we had to remove the shroud, the fan shroud, and the alternator to get at it. Unfortunately, now that's not to say all headers will be the same. Like this one over here, you might be able to get at it. It's just that the equal length primaries kind of just get in the way of everything. So this is the driver's side. Again, you saw us come in with our ratchet on the front one now, just like the passenger side. And then on the top, we were using a combination of our regular length and our extended length. And then the bottom one, I could not get it from the bottom because there's a primary in the way. Couldn't do the straight shot. I could get on it from underneath, but I just could not get enough range. Just no range for it. So I ended up getting on top of it, and that way I was able to actually come down and work the flex again. Again, the extra long ones just become lifesavers. Gear wrench is probably the lowest quality you want to buy. You want to get as high of a tooth count as possible. The higher the tooth count, the more clicks you're going to get, the more of a turn. Because if you get something that's really cheap and the clicks are really far between each other, you might not get enough swing to actually tighten it. So the driver's side actually ended up being the easiest because it ended up being the least amount of disassembly. And it was funny because on the disassembly, they're kind of even. I almost felt like the passenger side was a little bit easier to deal with, but then having to pull out the alternator and everything on the passenger side to do the install definitely had a lot more challenges. Well, there guys have it. Yes, you can install headers on your own. Is it going to be a challenge? Most definitely it will be. I do have a huge advantage. I am on a hoist, but what I'm hoping this video is going to bring to you guys is you're going to see a lot of vantage points and thought process on how we got these out in the previous video and how we put them back in. And can it be done on the ground? I think it can. It's going to be much more difficult because you don't have, you're at these weird angles lying down. So you definitely want to have an extra set of hands if you are going to be doing this on the ground. I did about 95% of this by myself, and then towards the end I had help. We were just taking turns on all the fasteners and just shooting ideas back and forth of what to do and just troubleshooting. So I'm hoping that this video will help you be able to study the job beforehand. That's a huge thing that you need to do, is you need to really go underneath the vehicle, really have a plan of attack, make sure that you have all the tools ready to go. And like I said before, be really prepared to have the vehicle out of commission for a little bit. Like, give yourself 2 weekends at least, preferably 3 if you can. It's just going to give you, you're not going to feel so rushed and get flustered doing this job. If you do not have that kind of time available to do the job, I highly recommend that you have a professional do it. It's just going to save you a lot of headache and make sure you get the car back on the road. But if you guys want to take it on, it's totally doable.